The screen opens with elegant music, showing a grand billionaire's mansion filled with flashing lights and expensive decorations. But within this world of wealth, arrogance runs deep. They never expected that mocking the quiet janitor in the corner would cost them everything, over $1 billion. The night was alive with glittering lights, music, and the low hum of expensive conversations. A billionaire family had thrown open the doors of their grand estate for an evening that would showcase their wealth and influence. The ballroom was nothing less than a palace, with crystal chandeliers dripping gold light over polished marble floors. Politicians brushed shoulders with movie stars, investors sipped rare wine alongside media magnates, and every corner of the room gleamed with extravagance. Laughter echoed beneath ceilings painted with Renaissance murals, and the tables overflowed, with delicacies imported from every corner of the world. It was not a party. It was a statement of power, carefully designed to remind every guest that this family sat at the top of the social pyramid. The hosts moved through the crowd like royalty, every gesture rehearsed to perfection. They boasted openly about their achievements, never shy of reminding anyone who would listen about the billion-dollar merger they were about to finalize. This deal, they claimed, would expand their empire across continents, cementing their name in history as the family who controlled the future of industry. They laughed with arrogance as they spoke of rivals who had tried and failed to reach such heights. It was clear to anyone watching that they believed themselves untouchable. Guests nodded, flattered to be included in the orbit of such wealth, but behind some polite smiles, envy lingered. Outside the circle of bright conversation, hidden in the shadows of chandeliers and champagne glasses, the janitor moved quietly. Dressed in a plain uniform, she went about her work with precision and dignity. When a careless guest spilled wine across the polished floor, she was there within seconds, crouching silently to wipe the mess before anyone could slip. When a corner gathered dust, she brushed it away with practiced hands. She was invisible to most, yet it was her presence that ensured the mansion sparkled. Her face betrayed no irritation, no exhaustion, only patience, the kind born from years of being overlooked in rooms where she did all the unseen labor. But she was not completely invisible. The family noticed her, not with gratitude, but with scorn. Their words, dripping with disdain, sliced through the air. They laughed loudly about her uniform, mocking her for standing in the midst of wealth when she clearly belonged elsewhere. One guest chuckled about how strange it was to see someone of her background in such a place. The laughter spread, shallow and cruel, as if belittling her was a form of entertainment. She did not respond, did not flinch, and that silence carried more strength than they realized. Her eyes did not linger on their faces, but they caught every word, every smirk, every arrogant glance. The conversations returned to the merger, the only thing grand enough to rival their vanity. Guests speculated on how much the deal was worth, whether it was truly $1 billion or perhaps even more. The family swelled with pride, exaggerating numbers, painting pictures of yachts, private islands, and new power centers that would soon belong to them. They spoke of their future as if it were already carved in stone, their arrogance shielding them from the reality that business was never so certain. In hushed tones, a few cautious voices reminded them that the deal was fragile, that one mistake could turn investors against them. But the warning was brushed aside, dismissed with the same arrogance they had used against the janitor. They believed nothing could touch them. Throughout the night, the janitor continued her silent work. Guests stepped around her as if she were part of the furniture, some ignoring her entirely, others pausing only to sneer. She gave no reaction, only continued her careful movements, her composure unshaken. Her silence, though, was not emptiness. It was watching, waiting, recording. Every insult, every boast, every careless word was written somewhere deep in her mind. To her, their glittering laughter did not shine. It only revealed how hollow they truly were. As the night drew to a close, the family gathered their guests for one final show of grandeur. Glasses of the finest champagne were distributed, crystal flutes catching the golden light as if they held liquid sunlight. The head of the family raised a toast, his voice booming with pride. He declared that the merger was only the beginning, that their dynasty would last generations, and that tonight marked the dawn of a new age of success. Applause filled the ballroom, cheers erupted, and the guests clinked glasses in celebration of what seemed like inevitable triumph. The janitor stood in the background, expression unreadable, her eyes fixed on the scene. They had mocked her as if she were powerless, dismissed her as if she were beneath their notice. Yet, as they raised their glasses to their own glory, they had unknowingly planted the seed of their downfall. The arrogance in their laughter, the cruelty in their words, and the blindness of their pride had already set a chain of events in motion. The room sparkled with celebration, but hidden beneath that glitter was the quiet truth that power built on arrogance can crumble in a single moment, and the one they laughed at would one day hold the power to take everything away. The following evening, the mansion once again came alive with music and chatter, but this time the air carried more weight. Tonight was not just about showing wealth. It was about securing power. The guest list was tighter, more prestigious, filled with bankers, global investors, and international executives tied directly to the billion-dollar deal that promised to reshape the family's empire. Journalists lined the back of the grand ballroom, pens scratching across paper, cameras flashing to capture every polished smile and raised glass. Every word spoken tonight would echo far beyond the estate's gilded walls, carried into boardrooms, and across continents. The family knew this and performed with the precision of seasoned actors. They floated through the crowd, draped in expensive fabrics, their jewelry glittering like small suns under the chandeliers. Their speeches rang loud and clear, dripping with rehearsed confidence. They spoke of ambition, of growth, of the greatness their empire would bring to the world. Hard work and opportunity, they repeated, their voices smooth, their smiles sharp, as if they themselves embodied the virtues of discipline and humility. Applause followed every sentence, but beneath the clapping hands and nodding heads, there were eyes watching closely, measuring more than just numbers. And yet, for all their grand speeches, their true nature revealed itself in the smallest moments. Servants carried trays of caviar and champagne through the crowd, ensuring glasses never emptied. Staff worked quietly to maintain order, but their presence, like that of the janitor in the corner, went unseen by most. The family, so eager to preach about opportunity, mocked the very people whose labor kept the illusion of perfection alive. Their arrogance was not hidden. It slipped out in laughter, in careless gestures, in the sharp cruelty of words spoken when they thought no one. Important was listening. Then came the moment that silenced even the shallowest laughter in the room. As the janitor passed by, her head lowered in quiet focus, one of the family members, accidentally, tilted his glass. Red wine cascaded across the marble floor, splattering dangerously close to the hem of her uniform. With exaggerated disdain, he demanded she clean it at once. His voice carried across the room, deliberately loud enough to draw attention. Guests turned their heads, curious, amused. Another voice cut in, sharper, colder. "What is someone like her doing here anyway?" he sneered. "A house like this is for those who belong, not people who scrub floors." The cruelty was deliberate, the humiliation staged for an audience. Laughter erupted, shallow and cruel, bouncing off the gilded walls of the ballroom. The janitor knelt without hesitation, her hands steady as she wiped the wine from the polished stone. But when the cameras caught her face, they revealed not shame, not anger, but calm strength. Her eyes, lifted for only a moment, were unshaken. They carried a quiet defiance that words could never capture. The journalists in the back did not miss it. Pens paused mid-sentence. Cameras clicked, recording the moment, the arrogance of the family and the unspoken dignity of the woman they tried to reduce. The humiliation was meant to amuse, but it did something else entirely. Whispers stirred at the edges of the crowd, subtle at first, but growing like ripples in water. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, their smiles faltering. Investors exchanged glances, recognizing the danger of arrogance displayed so openly. Not everyone in the room laughed. A few saw beyond the spectacle, saw how damaging such cruelty could appear when magnified under the lens of public opinion. Still, the family remained blind. Later in the evening, as the janitor quietly moved past with her cleaning cart, they chuckled again. Their arrogance had no limits. They mocked her as if she were powerless, as if she were nothing more than background furniture in their empire of glass and marble. They never paused to consider that power does not always shout. Sometimes it waits in silence. As the night wound down, the journalists gathered their notes, their expressions unreadable. Conversations turned hushed, whispers threading between clinking glasses. The cruel display had not gone unnoticed, and stories were already forming. The family dismissed it all as irrelevant gossip, convinced that the world cared more about their billions than the dignity of a single worker. In their minds, nothing could derail their triumph. They left the ballroom with heads held high, laughter still ringing, utterly unaware that the seeds of doubt had been planted in the very circles they sought to impress. Their arrogance blinded them, but others had seen. The cruelty they thought amusing was now captured, recorded, and whispered about in corners they could not control. What they dismissed as a meaningless moment would soon grow into something far greater. And while they celebrated themselves, the quiet janitor walked away with the same composure she had carried all evening, holding in silence the power to one day shatter everything they had built. The week that followed was filled with anticipation. In the towering glass offices of the family's corporate empire, preparations were underway for the meeting that would cement their legacy. The billion-dollar merger was to be finalized today, and every detail had been arranged to perfection. Long polished tables stretched across the boardroom, documents neatly stacked, screens prepared for presentations, and every chair reserved for some of the most influential investors in the world. The family entered with pride swelling in their chests, dressed in tailored suits that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Their smiles were confident, their laughter echoing with certainty. To them, this was already a victory. The hard work, they believed, was over. Today was only a formality before the announcement of their triumph to the world. The atmosphere was tense, but not with fear, rather with the heavy air of expectation. Investors and executives from across the globe filled the room, their sharp eyes watching every detail, their pens tapping softly against leather notebooks. Cameras were discreetly positioned to record the proceedings for posterity. The family basked in the attention, shaking hands with forced humility, dropping hints about the celebrations that would follow. Every move was calculated, every word rehearsed. This was to be their crowning moment. Then the lights dimmed slightly, signaling the beginning of the presentation. A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned toward the front where the family prepared to step forward, ready to deliver the polished speeches they had practiced 100 times. But before they could move, the doors opened with quiet authority. Into the room walked a woman they had overlooked so many times before. No longer dressed in the plain uniform of a janitor, she wore an elegant suit, tailored to perfection, carrying herself with a dignity that silenced even the most powerful voices. The air shifted. Investors rose from their seats, not for the family, but for her. Respect was shown in their nods, in the firmness of their handshakes, in the way they deferred to her presence. Shock washed across the family's faces. Their mouths parted, but no words came. Confusion flickered into disbelief, and disbelief into dread. They watched as the woman they had mocked, the one they had humiliated at their glittering parties, walked past them with quiet confidence and took her place at the head of the room. She did not glance their way, did not acknowledge their stunned expressions. Instead, she turned her attention to the investors, who welcomed her as though she were the very center of the empire. And then the truth unfolded. She was not just a janitor. She had been the silent partner all along, the key decision-maker behind the investment group funding the billion-dollar merger. For months, she had been observing, not just their wealth and ambition, but their character. What they believed was beneath their notice had been the very test they failed. Every careless laugh, every cruel insult, every arrogant dismissal had been weighed in her mind. What they thought was a game of humiliation had been a revelation of who they truly were. Images played across the screen, flashbacks captured by memory and moments witnessed by others. The spilled wine, the mocking words, the laughter at her expense, the hypocrisy of speeches about opportunity while demeaning those who worked in silence. The investors watched with grave faces, seeing not just arrogance, but risk. For what? Empire could truly last if it was built on disrespect and pride? When the room grew still, she spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, and final. We cannot trust our future with those who cannot respect the dignity of others. The words were simple, but they struck harder than any blow. They carried the weight of truth, the authority of someone who had earned her place not through arrogance, but through resilience. Gasps rippled through the room. Some investors shifted in their seats, shocked by the revelation. Others nodded quietly, already convinced. The family erupted in protest. Their voices rose, trembling with desperation. They begged for reconsideration, insisted it was all a misunderstanding, claimed their words had been taken out of context. They reached for excuses, for anything to undo what had just been spoken. But the room had already turned cold. The investors' eyes no longer sparkled, with interest but hardened with suspicion. Pens stopped moving, hands stopped shaking, and the tide shifted completely. In that moment, the billion-dollar deal crumbled. It was not slow or uncertain. It collapsed with the finality of a door slammed shut. No one was willing to place their trust, their money, or their reputations in the hands of people who had revealed themselves so unworthy. The family's pleas grew weaker as the silence of the investors grew louder. Dignity had triumphed over arrogance, and the humiliation was unbearable. As the meeting ended, the family sat frozen in disbelief, their empire unraveling before their eyes. The woman who once bent quietly to wipe their floors had risen to stand above them, not in anger, but in truth. And in that truth, everything they had built, every boast, every performance, every illusion of power, crumbled in front of their peers. The story broke before the family could even leave their glass tower offices. Within hours, headlines plastered. Across news sites and television screens carried the same shocking words. Billionaire family loses $1 deal after mocking worker. The public devoured the story hungrily, and what had begun as whispers in a ballroom now spread like wildfire. Videos of the cruel incident at the party surfaced online. Grainy recordings from guests' phones showing spilled wine, mocking laughter, and the quiet composure of the woman they had humiliated. Social media erupted. Hashtags calling out arrogance and injustice trended across the globe. Memes, editorials, and opinion pieces painted the family as a symbol of entitled cruelty, while the woman they once mocked was hailed as a figure of dignity, patience, and unshakable strength. The ripple effects were immediate and brutal. Investors began pulling out of deals overnight, unwilling to be associated with a name now synonymous with disgrace. Stock prices tumbled in freefall, wiping away billions in market value in the span of days. Longtime business partners issued statements severing ties, claiming they could not align themselves with a brand built on arrogance and disrespect. What was supposed to be the family's greatest triumph became their swiftest and most public downfall. The billion-dollar merger that would have cemented their empire was gone, and with it their reputation crumbled into dust. In the midst of this storm, the woman who had once pushed a cleaning cart through their halls was elevated to a global stage. Interviews requested her presence, magazines placed her on covers, and news anchors spoke of her as more than a powerful business figure. She became a symbol, proof that dignity carries weight even in the face of cruelty, that silence can be louder than arrogance, and that respect is the foundation upon which true power is built. Around the world, her story resonated with those who had been overlooked, reminding them that patience and integrity could outlast even the tallest towers of pride. Meanwhile, the family watched their empire collapse piece by piece. Their mansions, once filled with guests and music, fell silent. Cars that had lined their driveways were sold off to cover debts. Lavish vacations and parties became memories replaced by empty rooms and unpaid bills. The friends who had once toasted their wealth vanished without a word, unwilling to be tainted by the stench of failure. Invitations to exclusive events, once flooding their calendars, stopped arriving. The same people who had laughed alongside them at the humiliation of a worker now turned away in disgust, unwilling to stand beside those whose arrogance had been so publicly exposed. Behind closed doors, their confidence evaporated. Arguments erupted in hushed tones as blame shifted from one to another. Desperation filled their days as they reached out to old allies for support, only to be met with silence or polite refusals. Doors that had once opened with a phone call now slammed shut. The dynasty they had built on pride and entitlement was not just weakened, it was destroyed. They had believed themselves untouchable, but the truth had shown the world how fragile their power truly was. And through it all, the woman remained steady. She did not gloat, did not seek revenge in words or gestures. Instead, she carried herself with the same quiet dignity she had shown the night she bent to clean spilled wine. Now, however, she walked, with the knowledge that her strength had been seen, recognized, and honored. She became not just a business leader, but a voice for respect, justice, and humility in a world too often blinded by glitter and gold. The final chapter of this story unfolded not in a boardroom or ballroom, but in silence. The woman returned briefly to the estate where it had all begun. She walked past the towering gates and manicured gardens, past the walls that had once echoed with laughter at her expense. This time, she did not carry the tools of labor or wear the plain uniform of a worker. She carried only herself, clothed in confidence, her steps measured and steady. The mansion loomed behind her, but its power had faded, its grandeur hollowed by disgrace. She did not look back. Her lesson was clear without needing to be spoken. True wealth is not measured in money or marble floors, nor in stock prices or mergers. It is measured in respect, in the way one treats those who cannot offer anything in return. The family had mocked her for being beneath them, but in the end she stood taller than they could ever imagine. Their arrogance had blinded them, their cruelty had betrayed them, and their downfall was the price they paid. As the story closed, one truth lingered in the air like the echo of her silent steps. Those who build power on arrogance will see it crumble, while those who walk with dignity will stand unshaken. And so it was that she left behind the estate, not with bitterness, but with quiet triumph, living proof that respect once denied can become the greatest wealth of all.